Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is a Bitronistim. IDSF is a leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. Thank you so much to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing so we can very much bring you behind the headlines what is happening here in Israel. Today's discussion is going to be very critical. I think they all are, but this one in particular, because we're going to talk about something that is very much coming up to play now in terms of President Trump's plans for Gaza, right? Much of the plan revolves around taking the Gazan people and finding them new homes in other countries. And the world is crying and yelling about the ethics of this. Whether it's forcibly removing a people from their home or facilitating their emigration. Either way you look at it, people claim, how do you have the right to do either to an indigenous people in their homeland? So today, we're going to explore that issue, and we're going to try to get a better hold, a better understanding of the extent to which the Arab population in Gaza, the extent to which the Arab population in Judea and Samaria, the rest of Israel, is in fact indigenous to the land of Israel. What does it mean to be indigenous? Who are the indigenous people within the borders of the land of Israel? So we're going to try to define what it means to be indigenous. Whose land is this? What the historical migration patterns of the Arab people, of the Jews, to the land of Israel indicate about rights to this land. And once we have a hold on all of that, we're going to then try to answer this question about the emigration and the mobility of the peoples of this land. Meaning, if in fact the Arabs within Gaza are not indigenous, it's a much easier argument that in fact they should be more mobile. And just like they came in recently, they can exit. However, if you argue that in fact, no, they've been here for millennia, so then not that a people can't move, but that is obviously a more challenging proposition. So we're going to try to explore those issues. This is something that many of our viewers have asked us to discuss, and therefore we plan on discussing it in today's briefing. And to discuss this, we have an expert on these issues, Dr. Harold Rhode. Dr. Harold Rhode was an advisor on Islamic Affairs in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. He is very knowledgeable on these types of issues. So if we can just start from the beginning, how do you define indigenousness? It's a hard word to say. What are the criteria that typically are used to determine whether a people are considered indigenous to a specific land?
Well, let's just look at who the people are, the Muslims, and it's really the Muslims that we're talking about. I want to say, look, my PhD is basically about the Muslim population in the 16th and early 17th centuries of this land, and using Turkish, Arabic, whatever sources. And it's very clear, even back then, in the mosques in Tzfat, in the north, for example, the sermons were given in languages that people could understand, and there were 4 separate languages. Arabic, of course, Turkish, Kurdish, and Persian, and that means that's who was there. But we're really not so interested in that time frame. Let's bring it up a little later. Let's talk about the 19th century. Now, there are many travelers here who describe this land who are not Jewish and they're not Muslim. And Mark Twain, for example, the great American writer, says that he was here for a while. And he said the land was totally barren. You saw almost no green, no nothing, and almost no people. Now, Ulysses S. Grant, the former American president, after he was president, also took a tour of this land. And the same story, there were basically nobody here. So who are the indigenous people that are here? And again, I'm only going to concentrate on the Muslims. When the Jews started to return to the ancient Jewish homeland, which of course is only one, it's Israel. Or what is Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel? The Jews brought with them, first of all, employment opportunities. They brought health care with time and all that. And before that, actually, the Ottomans built this railroad from what is, let's say, Istanbul, all the way down to Mecca. And it went down through Syria and then crossed in what is today's Jordan. And all these are artificial countries, no borders, no nothing. And then they had a branch which branched out to Haifa from the railroad track, from northern Syria over to Haifa. There were no people, basically, to speak of here, very few. And when the Ottomans needed to build this land, or to build this branch, and the Germans actually, what did they do? They needed laborers. So people came in from what is today Syria. They came in what is today Jordan, and they called Haifa in Arabic al-Amal, which means the mother of work. So they came there they have no historical bonds with this land, and they settled there. And that's part of the people. Now, even a slightly earlier, in 1840, the rulers of Egypt at the time were trying to take over the Ottoman Empire. And so they marched into this land and had tons, their military, and the military needed people to help them. Now, one of the big places that they began to populate, because they needed services, was a place that the Arabs call Nablus. Even the name isn't Arabic. It's Neapolis, which means in Greek, new city. It's Shem. And one of the biggest families today in Nablus is called Masri, which in Arabic is Mitzri in Hebrew, which means Egyptian. They are originally from Egypt. I could go on and on. Now, how did I even start to learn this? Way back in 1973, I was in Amman, in Jordan. It's the first time I had been there. I had been studying in Egypt beforehand. I'm an old guy, I'm 75. So I remember this very, very well. And I go into a bookstore. If you really want to understand what people are thinking about, you go into a bookstore. People who own bookstores are trying to make a profit. So they sell what goes. And I found this book called it's in Arabic, History of Nablus and Balka. I didn't know who Balka was. And this is one of the major keys of what is called the Palestinian people today were from. Balka, I look on a map, is the area on the eastern side, what is in today Jordan, eastern side of the Jordan River. That's the lands there. And Nablus had enormous bonds with the people on the eastern side of Jordan. And then I said, well, what else can I learn from this? And I began to investigate. And I realized and I read the book, it was all, first of all, about commercial relations. And in this part of the world, commercial relations, you don't choose who you're going to marry. And so they intermarried both families on both sides of the border. And in Nablus and in that area, the Balka area, they've been intermarrying for a long time. They are one family. And then I began to ask questions about, what about Jerusalem Arabs? What about Hebron Arabs? And wouldn't you know it, it's exactly the same thing. Your families decide who you're going to marry. Whom did the people? Let's just take Hebron for an example. They intermarried with people in El Karak, which is on the eastern side of the river. They still do there. From my experiences in Karak, I found that they had a lot of relatives from Hebron. And so I asked, more and more, they're totally like intermarried. And many years ago, I think he was the foreign minister of Jordan. Jordan is the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, supposedly the East Bank. Someone came to speak at a well-known think tank in Washington, and they had lunch. I came to hear the guy, and he spoke, and I read his bio that they gave out. Where do you think he was born? This Hashemite kingdom guy. He was born in Hebron. And I'm listening, and he's talking about the Hashemites this, the Hashemites this. So, the end of the lecture, I raised my hand. I said, please help me understand. If you're part, and everything you've been talking about is the East Bank of the Jordan, but yet you were born and your family is from Hebron. I don't understand. You seem like you're one people. I am very proud of my Hebron origins. And he's going on. Well, I'm sure he is, but these families are east-west. That's how they married. Going on and on. Maybe one more thing, and this basically gives you the background to ask whatever questions you like, Moshe. You know, the British, when they ruled Palestine, mandated Palestine, they created Mandate Palestine. And it was after World War I. They took very good notes and immigration papers for Jews. But the more Jews that came in with all these modern skills, and they were building and building, they needed laborers. And so people streamed, and I mean streamed in from Syria, from Jordan, from what is today, was then Arabia, Saudi Arabia of today. And when you talk to these people, like you pretend you're dumb, and you ask them about their origins, they know where they're from. They know their ancestors. And so I'm curious then, what is this Palestinian people? The British took no note whatsoever of people crossing across from the east, crossing the Jordan River into what was then British mandated Palestine and what is Israel today. So who are these people? And if you want to talk about Gazans, what is fascinating is the Gazans, Arabic is as a billion dialects. No, I'm exaggerating, of course. But the local dialect of Gaza is much closer to Egyptian Arabic, which they're not the same languages. They all write in classical Arabic, but they don't speak the same languages. And I studied in Egypt, and I realized my background in what was Jerusalem Arabic were completely different. And I can give you a simple example. In Arabic, I want to go to school. In classical Arabic, you write, أريد أن أذهب إلى المدرسة. Just the sounds matter. In Jerusalem Arabic, بدي أروح مدرسة. The only word which is similar is madrasa, which is the Hebrew midrasha. It means a school. In Egyptian Arabic, أنا عاوز أروح مدرسة. عاوز is biddi, which is azhab. It's all different. Now, the Arabic of Gaza, the language that people spoke there, was much closer to Egyptian dialects than anything in what is Judeo-Samaria or the West Bank, whatever you wish to call it. So you've got a hodgepodge of everything. When then was the Palestinian people invented? Well, under the British mandate, these people, the Muslims, never called themselves Palestinians. The only people that did were the Jews. Jews who came wherever they were from. They had a Palestinian Jewish, and they were Jews they were Palestinian Jews. The Muslims called themselves Muslims. The absolute greatest territorial thing that they could come up was maybe southern Syria. There were a few numbers of intellectuals who called themselves part of British Palestine. But no, they were southern Syrians at most, or they were from this place or this village or that village. What they really say, when you ask them who they're from, they'll tell you who their family is. And the families have nothing to do with the borders today. And the Palestinian identity was invented in 1964, not that long ago. I was at the grand old age of 14 then. And that was when Yasser Arafat and the Soviets invented this. as a tool to use against Israel, which the Soviets were against, and the United States. There's, in short, the history of who these people are.
Harold, thank you so much. So let's try to take this for practically what that means right now in terms of their emigration and mobility. Meaning, if we take what you're saying at face value, and in fact, the Palestinian national identity was created 61 years ago. Well, at the end of the day, 61 years is a long time. Meaning, if we were to look in the United States, for example, people who emigrated to the US from South America, from Asia, from Europe in the 60s, and now they have children or grandchildren who they're raising in the US who speak fluent English and are Americans and have citizenship. We'd consider those people Americans. So
Exactly.
so let me finish the question, then I want you to answer.
Sorry.
So the question would then be, let's assume we accept everything that you're saying. So what? Meaning at a certain point they have an identity. And how does that therefore impact our ability to tear away that identity from them?
One of the things my mentor, the greatest Middle Eastern historian of the latter part of the 20th century, Bernard Lewis, taught is when you talk to another people, you have to think about how he thinks about the world. And what I described to you before is how they talk about things. The idea of being born in a land doesn't matter from their point of view. What matters is who your family is. They don't care, but they know that we do, and they will use anything to any excuse to bash Israel and bash the United States. Trump is maybe a little different thing. He doesn't care about the bashing. In my lifetime, and all the time I worked in government, you would see a lot of the diplomatic people was like, "Oh my God, what did we do? How do we put it right?" Trump doesn't care about this, so it seems. I don't know Trump. I can't talk for him personally. But these people, look, let's take Jordan. Jordan, you know what Jordan is a country besides people who immigrated there from God knows where. In 2011, when the Syrian civil war happened, about 2 million people, Syrians, crossed into Jordan. They're all Sunni. You never hear about them. They're all basically absorbed. They're the same families. That's how it works. And there are also about the same number, 2 million, of Iraqis who after we liberated Iraq and the place fell apart, to very little basically to America's fault. It's a bunch of other things. I lived through this. I was in the Iraq War. All I can say is that we never hear about. There's no big brouhaha that these people need to go home. And I'm saying is, in this part of the world, people have been moving galore. There is a marvelous guy from his family is in Bakr al-Gharbiya, which is if you're taking Route 6 north in Israel, and you're going, it's inland from Khadera, that area. Now his wife is from Tulkarm, and the Bakr al-Gharbiya is in Israel proper. Tulkarm is in the future Palestinian state. Is this an intermarriage? Is this who are these? The traditional marriage patterns that Bakr al-Gharbiya and Tulkarm marry. The borders mean nothing. Now, the only ones that seem that they ever complain about are because the Jews, who have no right to this land from a Muslim point of view, the Jews have it, and so will use any argument to make us feel guilty here in the West. And we are so dumb, since we don't understand how they think and refuse to accept it and to think about it. We look in, oh my God, they have a right. And the question, Moshe, that you just asked is a wonderful Western question of no relevance to their lives. How they see it. I don't care how I see it. But they remember there was a Zionism is racism UN resolution. Well, To the best of my knowledge in Judaism, if your mommy is a Jew, you're a Jew. It doesn't matter what you say from a Jewish point of view. Your daddy could therefore be the man in the moon. He could be Chinese. He could be Russian. He could be anybody. But if your mother is Jewish, you're Jewish. And that's a little hard for me to see, therefore, that Judaism or Israel is racist, because the definition of, for at least for making aliyah, to immigrating to Israel, if you have one Jewish grandparent, doesn't matter what it is, and that's because that was Hitler's definition of, he took anybody who was Jewish as if they had one Jewish grandparent. What I'm saying is that if tomorrow it was decided that Zionists are carrot eaters, there would probably be a UN resolution against that Zionists are carrot eaters. It's absurd. They know how to use everything against America and Israel. That's the bottom line. I don't care whether we like it or not. This is the reality of this part of the world.
Harold, this is very instructive. And what you're suggesting is the idea that a person can choose their national identity. You can move to a new land and within a few years get some paperwork and suddenly your identity has changed. That's not the way that the Arab world views national identity. And therefore, whether they started living in Israel last year, the 1960s, the 40s, or earlier, they're going back centuries in order to really establish that culture. So we only
Yes,
have time for one quick question. We're almost out of time, but again, whenever I have you on, I always think I got to get you back more frequently.
I'm welcome. I'm happy to come on. I believe in what you're doing. I believe in the Bitconistim and what they're doing. Happy to.
Amazing, amazing. So one final question. We got 2 minutes for this. If the Trump plan, in fact, comes to fruition and we see the moving of the Gazan people out of Gaza, do you think ultimately the Arab world will accept it? Because at the end of the day, they view the world the way you're describing it.
Well, they'll scream and yell, and they will. Let me just give you an example. You remember when Trump moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? All of our big experts in the United States and in Europe are around. Oh my God, the Americans, you do that, all Americans are not going to be safe. They're going to kill Americans. The Arab world is going to revolt. Do you remember what happened then, Moshe, in the Arab world?
Nothing.
Yes. We need to stop thinking about the world as we do. And the Muslims here are very, very good at using anything. See, you're a carrot eater. You're a racist. I don't care whatever it is. And we get, instead of saying, like Trump says, like, I don't care what you say. This is the story, buddy. And again, just maybe to end with a quote from Bernard Lewis. He quoted a British diplomat we were so, Americans and even the British later were concerned with, we should check out what we want to do with the locals. And the British diplomat who knew this land, this area very, very well said, it doesn't matter what they think. It matters what we say. They know what we're going to do, not what we say, but what we tell them what we're going to do. And somehow they adjust, they manage, and they're very good at that. Just like they revolted when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. Is there going to be a thing? Don't worry, the American media, the foreign media is going to find, a rally here of 6 people here, there, maybe even a little more. But I expect if you have these massive population transfers, which you have had galore throughout Middle Eastern history, even from the time of the Bible, everything will work out. But our biggest enemy is the Western media and the so-called experts in the capitals of the West.
Dr. Harold Rhode, always a great pleasure to speak with you, to learn from you. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We hope it was educational. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.